Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So I just want to welcome all of you, both in person and on Zoom, to our KUMC Career Development Symposium. Um, Hopefully the first of many. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tyler Weaver. I'm a fourth-year postdoc here at KUMC, and I'm currently the chair of the KPA. And so I just want to give a minute or two, or give a few words about the KPA for a minute or two. So the KPA is the KUMC Postdoctoral Association. And essentially what we do is we serve to support and advocate for postdoctoral affairs on campus, essentially serving as a liaison between the postdocs and administration. And so a lot of what we do is related to career development. So we hold monthly career development seminars. We hold events like this. Some of you might have been present for our mock study section last year. And so one thing that I do want to point out is that we're looking for people that are interested. So if you're a KUMC postdoc and you want to get involved, we'll be sending out some emails probably in January about being part of the KPA, being part of the KPA board. So if you're interested in those type of leadership positions, stay tuned. And so what we're going to do for this career development workshop is we've basically split this up into 2 days. And most of this was actually organized by Rebecca Forright, who's a KPA board member. And what Rebecca originally envisioned was that we would have basically a 2-day boot camp where everybody could come, attend the sessions that they're interested in, and take something away, whether it's related to academia, industry, government, etc. And so the way this is going to work is day one is going to be largely focused on academia. So we have a variety of different speakers that will talk about things such as teaching philosophy statements. We have several faculty members from a variety of different institution types who will talk about kind of their pathway to their current positions. We'll also have sessions on website building, etc. And then tomorrow on day two, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about non-academic career paths, including industry, government, nonprofits, and so on. And so with that, I just hope that everybody takes something away from this, and we'll also send out a survey later on for feedback for future years. And then Rebecca's going to give a few words about some of our sponsors.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. Yeah, so we have these amazing sponsors to thank for our ability to have all these speakers come and present. So first off, the Center for Children's Healthy Lifestyles and Nutrition is a research group that has 59 faculty associated with it. They span 5 strategic areas, including education, research, advocacy, community, and clinical. And they have been wonderfully supportive of this event. And second, we have the KU Diabetes Institute, which formed in 2007. Its mission is to advance research leading towards the prevention and control of diabetes, as well as an eventual cure for the disease. So thank you to our sponsors. As Tyler mentioned, we are requesting that you provide us feedback because this will be the first of hopefully an ongoing tradition of providing this career development workshop. So we'll show this throughout, but you can scan this QR code. It'll take you to an anonymous Google Drive form for you to fill out and tell us what you think, what might be missing, and what worked really well. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Dr. Lisa Harlan Williams. Dr. Harlan Williams received her bachelor's in biology from Henderson State University in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. She earned her PhD in molecular genetics under the guidance of Dr. Stephen Benedict in the Department of Molecular Biosciences at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas. Her research interests focus on breast cancer susceptibility gene BRCA1 and its role in cellular metabolism. Her long-term research goal is to delineate the mechanisms by which BRCA1 regulates the metabolic switch that ultimately influences tumorigenesis. Dr. Harlan Williams is the director of the KU Cancer Center Accelerate Cancer Education Summer Research Program for high school students and is passionate about her interactions with many different learners and specifically loves engaging with young trainees as they initiate their career development. And Dr. Harlan Williams will be here talking to us about crafting your teaching philosophy statement. Just a couple other minor things. We are recording this session so that it can be viewed asynchronously. And if you have any questions, I encourage you to put those in the chat if you are watching over Zoom, and we will help facilitate that question to Dr. Harlan and throughout the day. With that, please help me in welcoming Dr. Harlan.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, okay, awesome. All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here. So in my bio, I realized I probably left out the parts that are most interesting to you, which was what did I do for a postdoc? So, so I have a little bit of time, so I'm going to share you my story. 'Cause I think it's important for you all at this stage in your careers to realize that there's many different paths. So when I finished graduate school, my mentor was very much academia. And so I did a postdoc at the H. Lee Moffitt Cancer Center down in Tampa, Florida. It's shares the same campus with the University of South Florida. And I was down there so my training in graduate school was immunology. So I did a cancer immunology postdoc. And and I was there for a year before life decided that I needed to come back to the Kansas City area. Life means a husband who's now, we have kids and everything. So anyway, I came back I started looking for jobs in the Kansas City area. And I couldn't really decide what I was going to do. If I was going to maybe work for a contract research organization or go into pharma. And there's not a whole lot of pharma here in Kansas City, but there's tons of contract research organizations here in Kansas City. But I love the academic setting. And the University of Kansas Cancer Center had just hired Dr. Roy Jensen. And his goal was to bring an NCI designated cancer center here. So I figured this guy probably is setting up a lab and probably needs a postdoc. So I sent him my CV, and kind of the rest is history. That was 17 and a half years ago. So I came to KU Med in 2005. I think that's right. And I started my second postdoc after a year down at Moffitt. And completely leaving the field of immunology, which was a little bit scary, right? One, I love immunology and that field. And two, like I had done all my training in that. What am I doing? But I was still in cancer, and that's what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do cancer research. So, so then I have just stayed on with Dr. Jensen. So, and I have a different career path even within academia. So I am non-tenure track. So you'll learn as you investigate different institutions. So KU Med has 3 different tracks. You can be research, which is kind of your standard, get on the tenure track, become assistant professor, associate professor, get your tenure, and you're writing grants and all that. Okay. But then there's also a clinical track because we are affiliated with the hospital, but then there's an education track. And along the way, there's, assistant professor and then associate professor and full professor. And there's these rubrics that kind of tell you about the career development. I didn't know any of this when I first started here. I had no idea. So you just kind of, you get mentored along the way and you stumble across information. And there wasn't a postdoctoral association like this when I started. So I think this is a great association. This is a great day for you guys to learn about all this stuff. So I eventually, went and got a research assistant professor position in the Department of Anatomy and Cell Biology. And I purposely went to a different department than Dr. Jensen because I didn't want anybody to think that I had that position just because that's the department that my mentor was in, because I still work with Roy. I help him run his lab. I have my research project going in there. We train MD, PhD students. We have graduate students. And so I still work with him and have all this time, but my appointment is in a different department. And one of the reasons that I'm in the department that I am is because I went looking on campus to see who had the most funding, because I was trying to learn, right? So how do you write grants? You know, who else to teach me but the most successful person on campus, which at the time was Dale Abrahamson, who was the chair of anatomy and cell biology. And so I just went and met with him, and he willingly met with me. And he shared his specific aims page with me, and he just kind of got me going. And don't get me wrong, Dr. Jensen did all that too, but that was a different set of skills that I was gathering from that. So I think advocating for different types of mentoring relationships is really important at this stage in your career, and being okay, like just cold calling somebody and saying, hey, would you mind meeting with me? Because most of the time people really want to, and they want to help you guys. So I met with him and kind of developed a relationship with him. And as I met with him in my annual reviews each year, he was like, I think you might consider the education track, because a lot of what I was doing, I'm still non-tenure track. Okay. But a lot of what I was doing, is because, I was just doing more education type activities on this rubric for this particular institution. So we switched myself to education track. And so, you know, I to tell you that there's lots of different paths from where you're at. Even within academia. So I still am on non-tenure track. I have a split responsibility. So in addition to doing research, I have the senior leadership kind of administration role within the University of Kansas Cancer Center. And that role puts me in charge of the Cancer Center Support Grant that earns us National Cancer Institute, now comprehensive Cancer Center designation. So I've helped submit from the get-go. So I was on the first grant. And so the things that I do there, I really kind of organize the whole process. I write probably the majority of it. Each section has different writers, but I edit all of it, work with a group of people to get this massive grant submitted. So I do that. The Cancer Center Support Grant probably, well, it depends on the time of year, right? So, but it can take anywhere from 40 to 80% of my effort, depending. And then I do research also. So it just kind of ebbs and flows. But through that, I've also started this summer high school research program for high school students. I think it's just great for students to be able to get on campus and have a research experience and learn like what they like, and also maybe even realize, hey, this isn't for me. So anyway, I have my hands in all sorts of different things, but ultimately, I think you can do that in academia, and you probably can do that. And you might hear of that tomorrow in the industry section too, is that there's many, many, many different paths. And my very good friend that I met in graduate school, she has her PhD, and she works for a law firm, right? So there's lots of different opportunities at this stage in your career. And so I encourage you to just, you know, go explore it all about whatever you're curious or passionate about. Okay, so with that little spiel, then I'm going to talk to you guys about crafting your teaching philosophy statement. So how many of you all teach? So I think that's one different thing about being at a medical center, is there's not as many teaching opportunities as there. So when I did graduate school, I taught the whole time, partly because my graduate school mentor was very poor, and that was how that's how we got paid the whole time I was in graduate school. But I taught the whole time, so I've done a lot of teaching. Okay, so how many of you like teaching? Okay, everybody likes teaching in some way, shape, or form. Do any of you have a teaching philosophy statement? No. You have one. Okay, good. I'm seeing. Oh, okay. So you'll let me know when there's questions or comments in the chat. Okay. All right. So, all right, so I'll be honest, I did not write my teaching philosophy statement until 2 or 3 years ago. Okay. Because nobody told me I was supposed to have one. And the first time I ever had to have one was KU Med has this website, this tool. It's called the Faculty Activity Collaboration Tool, FACT. And as faculty members, you have to put all this information about yourself in here, and it generates this CV that's in the standard KU Med format that then you use with your annual reviews with your chair of your department. Okay, and in there, it asks for a teaching statement. I was like, okay. And so after actually going through this, I got to go back and edit my teaching statement because I got there's some things I can do better. Okay, so hopefully you'll pick up something here that I think you'll either, if you have a teaching statement, you might go take a look at it. And if you don't have a teaching statement, I think I might convince you that it's worth writing one. Okay. Okay. Let me go. All right. So what is it? So, and funny enough, PubMed has a lot about stuff about this. So does Google Scholar. So this is a purposeful, reflective essay about your teaching beliefs and practices. Okay. And it's a narrative, right? You're describing how, what you think about teaching, things that you've taught, and I'll go through everything about like what you would put in the statement. And this is what my teaching statement is lacking, is concrete examples. Like I haven't ever, when I write my teaching statement, I write how I think I teach and what I would want my learners, but there's a lot of things that are missing from my statement. So concrete examples about how you put in place your beliefs in your teaching and your learning process. And it's your portrait of what you think teaching should be. Okay. So, and everybody has their own experiences around teaching, right? Okay. So why have one? So, it is a really effective exercise that helps you kind of conceptualize your approaches to your teaching process. And it's always good to be thoughtful about these things, because I was thinking about this the other day, and I always do my best thinking in the shower. So, I was washing my hair and thinking about this, and I was realizing how many teachers, because I have kids that are in like middle school and high school, and the teachers, how they have this tremendous training on teaching and how to teach, but they don't necessarily have to be content experts, right? Whereas we become these highly trained content experts and we get zero training on teaching. And so I think like when you're a good teacher, it's just natural, or you've been someplace where teaching training was part of your program. But you go back and think about some of your professors and the ones that you really resonated with and really learned a lot from. They probably are just naturally that way, or they went and learned some teaching methods that they're implementing in the classroom. And then I'll guarantee you can think of professors that were not so great at transmitting information, and you kind of can't blame them. We were never trained to be teachers. And so I do think writing a teaching philosophy statement as a scientist makes you go think about teaching and the process of teaching. And I think it's good for eventually helping your students learn. Okay, so and it's included in an academic job application package. Okay, so a lot of times you won't have your teaching philosophy in your CV or your bio sketch, right? So, or even your cover letter. So it gives you a chance to write about how you think teaching works in your career. And also it can serve as a writing example for hiring the people who are hiring. And then again, my first experience with writing this statement was for annual reviews. So I had to have this as part of my CV. Okay, is there a question or a comment? I'm happy to You want to save it? Okay. All right. I'm okay. Either way, you just let me know. Okay. So there's a lady named Nancy Van Note Chisholm, and she's at Ooey Pooey now. But the act of taking time to consider your goals and your actions and your visions provides an opportunity for development that can be personally and professionally enriching. And reviewing and revising former statements of teaching philosophies can help teachers reflect on their own growth and renew their dedication to the goals and the values that they hold. I mean, she has a really great paper. And will they get the slides? Yeah. On the slides towards the end, I have all these links and references for you guys to go check out. And she's one of them. Okay. So what do you include in your teaching statement? So again, this is a reflection of why you teach and why you teach the way you do. Your perception of how learning occurs, the goals that you have for yourself as a teacher and also for your learners. So a description of like your teaching style and then how you think that facilitates a student learning. And how do you know they're learning, right? Are you, assessing yourself? Are you looking at evaluations? Are you getting evaluations on yourself? Or are you asking your students for evaluation? And are you looking at those that do come and really, not everybody's going to jive with your teaching style. It's just not going to work for everybody. But I think that you can always pick up nuggets of information from feedback. And, thinking about how you create an inclusive environment in your classroom. Do you, encourage people to interrupt and to ask questions and to feel safe around you about saying, I do not understand that. Or are you like, that can wait for later. I'm going to say, I want to transmit all the information and we'll have discussion later. I don't think there's any wrong way, however you feel about it, but that's what you put in your teaching statement. And do you, there's this whole concept that's come along for me, probably in the last 5 years, but maybe you all experienced it in your earlier training, but the flipped classroom, right? Where basically, you look at the PowerPoint and you don't have your traditional didactic in class anymore, but classes for discussion. Okay. So that's, is somebody interested in using that? And do you look at different ways of teaching and addressing the different learners in your class? So all of that is what you can include in your teaching statement. You can also include courses maybe that you've developed or TA'd, or ideas on how you would structure a class, or like if your qualifications and your expertise, you think it lends you to teaching a particular type of class, you could describe what classes you would teach and how you would go about teaching those classes. If you've mentored, that is a form of teaching, whether people think of it that way or not, right? But if you've mentored or trained somebody in your lab, and so all of that type of thing, those are the concrete examples that I'm missing in my teaching philosophy statement that I need to go tuck in to places. So I think it's really interesting, the whole assessment, because I don't think of, at the end of my classes and at the end of today, I'm not going to be like, so guys, what did you learn? Tell me, did you learn anything? Maybe I should, right? But that's typically not me. I'm going to transmit my information. And then I'm going to be like, if you guys have any questions, come ask me, right? But so that is one thing that after working through this and developing this presentation for you all, I definitely need to think about how I'm assessing. Now my high school program that I run in the summer, I'm very much about assessment. I do a pre-survey, where's their knowledge base? And then I do a post-survey after their 6-week program, like what kind of knowledge have they gained? And then I survey the mentors who participate in the program, Funny though, I never ask questions about me. So maybe I should. So I probably need to edit my survey and let them give me feedback. I ask them to give feedback on the program and like things that are, but not on me personally. So, but I probably should. And so, like I said, and this is something that I didn't know when I first started. So maybe you know this, but I'll tell you anyway. So part of your tenure packages is teaching evaluations. So anytime you teach, you need to ask for an evaluation, whether it's from, and so this is different depending on the type of teaching, right? But here at academic medical centers, typically there's one faculty that coordinates the program, but they have all these different professors come in and teach, right? Whereas like a really undergraduate focused institution or more teaching focused institution, maybe it's just one professor all year, but teaching evaluations are critical to have in your tenure package. So, and there's probably 10 years that I taught that I never received an evaluation. And so when I went up to move from assistant to even get into assistant professor, didn't have any teaching evaluations, right? I had to, but everybody writes letters of support. You ask for, so I asked them to specifically approach my teaching if they had seen me teach. But also I had to start asking for evaluation and then keep them and then try to remember that you have them. So file things away because you want those evaluations, not just for your tenure packages, but then look at them and truly take in the feedback. Do you guys remember the website rateyourprofessor.com? Is it still out there? I remember I was on there and somebody was like, she is 100% unapproachable. And I was like, wow, okay. So, but you know, I probably could have guessed who did that. And, okay, that's fine. Not everybody's going to like me. That's okay. But my teaching style didn't resonate with that person, but I can tell you that I took it to heart because, and then I was sitting in a different teaching workshop and you were like, they were talking about how basically students form their opinion of you in like the first 2 minutes of your class. So you set the tone for your entire semester in the first 2 minutes of your class. So then I decided, okay, how am I going to be more approachable in the first 2 minutes of these class, right? So it didn't, it did affect me, right? So you can use that feedback to make yourself a better teacher. Okay. And then as you're writing your teaching philosophy statement, you got to think about what's the purpose. Like for me, right? It's been all about annual evaluations, but for you guys, it'll probably be maybe about getting a job or promotions, right? So know your audience. Okay. Who are you applying to? Is the university that you're applying to have a religious mission? You know, maybe there's some things on their website and their mission that you can weave into your teaching statement. And you do this in grantsmanship too, right? You go to the funding agency and you look at that funding agency and what do they want to fund? And you take some of their key strategic initiatives and you're weaving that throughout your grant. You would do that the same way with your teaching philosophy statement, okay? Or if your institution has an environmental mission, right? So be smart about who your audience is and why you're writing this statement. Okay, and there was actually that there was a study done that the type of institution that you're applying to matters. Okay, so this was an academic career readiness assessment that was developed by the Office of Career and Professional Development at UCSF. And if you're ever looking for some professional development, faculty development, UCSF has an incredible website, an incredible faculty development website. They do all sorts of things for trainees. So again, at the end of this presentation, I have a whole list of references for you and you should go check out UCSF. I'm sure there's others too. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure that it's a strength of KU Med. I think it's getting better. But to me, and I've worked with some of the people at UCSF, they do some really great stuff. Okay, so they did this ACRA and they interviewed 18 different faculty, 17 or 18. The paper is on this website. So And they got faculty from all different types of institutions. So an institution that was solely teaching and no research, institutions that were all research and no teaching, and then institutions that were mixed. And they asked them, like, what do you look at and what do you value when you're hiring somebody? Okay, and so these are all the applicant qualifications that they have: teaching experience, philosophy, scientific communication, commitment to diversity, fit. And by fit, they go ahead in this paper and kind of define this as, do you fit the research mission? Do you fit with the colleagues in that department, right? Fit can mean a lot of different things. Collegiality, scholarship, research with undergrads, mentoring, scientific independence. You can see all these. These are all these different qualifications that applicants were being evaluated for, okay? So they asked the faculty at these different types of institutions to select 5 core qualifications for their applicants. Like, if you, out of those qualifications on the previous slide, pick 5, okay? So research intensive faculty. So these people are at institutions that there's not much teaching. So they valued scientific vision, scientific independence, fundability, scholarship, and fit, okay? If you are applying at a teaching intensive institution, those faculty value things very different. So teaching experience, teaching philosophy, commitment to diversity, fit, and collegiality. And then if you're at an institution where it's a little of both, which I would classify KU Med as something that's both, right? There's research and there's teaching intensive faculty here. Collegiality, teaching experience and teaching philosophy, mentoring and research with undergrads, and scientific communication. So you can see how when you're writing your teaching philosophy statement, it really matters your audience, okay? What you're doing it for and what you're hoping to accomplish with it. Okay, so what if you haven't taught much, right? Which a lot of you in here are, and possibly online too, are in that position. Okay, so draw from your experiences as a student, okay? And what teachers did you like? And what, as you look back now, what did they do that you liked and worked for you? And remember, you know, we could be talking about the same professor and something's going to resonate with me that didn't work for you, but something else worked for you that, you know, okay, that's fine. And then you're going to remember teachers that you did not connect with and think about the things that they did or didn't do that, that just didn't work for you. Okay. And that all can support and help you develop like how you would teach. Okay. List the courses that you think you could teach. And then again, have you ever trained a student in the lab, or have you ever tutored a student? Tutoring is teaching, right? Just on a one-on-one or a small group. Okay. It's the same thing. Or what mentoring have you done? So, and how do you mentor? All of that, it can go into a teaching statement, and those experiences can shape how you would transmit information to a classroom. Okay. And also, how do you approach mentoring different people? So I have a high school program. You cannot work with high school students the same way you could a graduate student or a postdoc. You just can't. And usually I have to remind the faculty of that, because we've been working in labs for so long, especially here, right? They've had graduate students, they're not even having very many undergrads here, right? So graduate students and postdocs, and they've long forgotten what it's like to be a high school student. And so you really have to be thoughtful about meeting people where they are. And that's true in whatever presentation you're giving, right? Okay, so things to not put in your teaching statement. Do not point out gaps in your skill set, okay? You might say, oh, I haven't taught much, right? But I'm expert in this and I could teach this. I've presented at national meetings and I have taught my research. right? You could start off with, okay, maybe I haven't taught a lot, but let's not focus on that. Focus on all the things that you think you can do or that you're capable of. Or, I mean, how many times have you presented in lab meeting, right? Those are your ability to put together information and then transmit it to people. Okay. So, unstamped yet. Oh, I can't even say the word this morning. Don't put in a bunch of garbage, right? And don't put in something like, oh, I taught a class. And if they go and look and do some digging and realize, like maybe you, proctored an exam, that's very different, right? So don't go overstate things just because you feel like oh, I'm not fully prepared to I need to look good in this application. Okay, jargon, too much philosophy, don't go off and philosophize about your teaching, right? Stick to who you are. And if you're doing applications, don't forget to change out the school's name, right? That would be bad, and that has happened. And not me. I'm just saying, this rule is out there because somebody has done it, right? And then don't let it just be a repeat of information that you have in your CV. Okay. It's and when you're doing a teaching statement, like part of the tenure package or part of your annual evaluation is that you also have a research statement. So it's not your research statement. Okay. It's different. So this is again a chance to talk about you and your styles and how good you are at transmitting information and how good are your learners learning. Okay, so you want it to be brief and well written, and so the length varies on the why you're doing this. Okay, so my teaching statement right now is probably a page. Okay, for annual evaluations, I wouldn't go more than a page. But if you're putting this in a job application and maybe you're at a teaching intensive institution, it might be 3 or 4 pages, right? So I think if there's ever a question, it's okay to ask that, right? So what's the link that you're looking for? And I think it's okay to say, are there specific things that you're looking for in this statement? I want to be sure I include them, right? A narrative first person approach. Be sincere and unique. Again, be true to who you are as a teacher and as a person, and be specific. So put in those concrete examples. And again, this is what I have to go back and do and talk about the people that I've trained and not be so abstract and vague. You can be discipline specific. So, a lot of us will teach things. I teach tumor immunology. So people have figured out I have this immunology background. So I still teach immunology classes, which is great because that lets me kind of stay in that world. But I'll teach breast cancer classes, right? So your research is very much part of who you are and how you've developed your expertise, right? But there's probably a lot of different classes that you could teach, just fundamental classes. So be humble. And I think it's really important to ask for review. Ask another colleague, ask your friend, ask your mentors. You could ask them for their teaching statement as an example. And you could say, hey, could you take a look at this and let me know what you think? And be open to that review and criticism, just like you would if it were a grant application, right? And then revise. Because I think it's important to, and I would even say revise maybe annually, like teaching experiences and philosophy and strategies and techniques, they change, right? So I could probably go back and write a whole section in my teaching statement about how to engage in a virtual world, right? Because most of our teaching experiences have been in person, but one summer I couldn't have my high school students on campus, so we did it virtually, and I learned a lot. Mostly that's no fun, but you still have to figure out ways to engage with people who are on Zoom. So you can certainly, pre-pandemic, probably have a different teaching philosophy statement than post-pandemic. Okay, so these are some questions. I'm not going to read all these to you, but again, you'll have the slide deck, and these are some questions that you can ask yourself so that you can get started. Okay, so why do you teach the way you do? What's the method that you typically rely on? And just work through each of these. And we've kind of already, these are all the things that we've already talked about that should be in your statement. So these are just prompts. How do you get started? And I think the last question is really interesting. Is there anything that you would do that would set yourself apart from most people in your field? Right. So I always think like the poll everywhere and like the boards where people can type things that's more engaging. That works for me. Maybe some other learner would be like, oh my gosh, this is boring. But so but how can you set yourself apart and make yourself a unique applicant, right? And thinking about this in terms of job applications.
Dr. Harlan, we have
Yes.
a question in the chat that
Okay.
I will read for you from Zachary Akegi Booston, I believe is how it's pronounced. They say, as a former high school teacher and district administrator who evaluated teacher, school principals, and gained numerous hours in professional learning, and one who studies best practices in education curriculum and pedagogy, how would you craft a statement from what they know is best practices with what you actually do in the classroom? So this idea, I believe, of, okay, we know this is actually the best practice, but in reality, this is what usually happens. Could you
Yes.
speak to that?
Okay, that's a great question. And here's where I think, what I've kind of learned about developing this is I think it's really good to put all that experience in there, because what it has done has now crafted who you are as a teacher in the classroom. Okay, so I think it's good to say, I recognize that these are some really good things to do based on my evaluations. And I've seen some things that don't work in classrooms. And these are the types of things I wouldn't do in my classroom. And this is how I've implemented these things in my own teaching. And this is how, these are things that I avoid in my own teaching and seeing how it did or didn't work in a classroom. So I think you have a lot of foundation that probably most of us don't have, way more than me, because you have that teaching education, that teacher education. And because you've done all these evaluations, you're in a unique position to have a really strong statement about, here are some things that I know that I've seen from experience that do work and don't work. And this is how it translates for me in my classroom. So maybe he could comment, or she, sorry, I didn't catch the first name, if that answered the question. So, but
Okay, we have another question
Okay.
coming in that says, could you please explain a bit about the clinical pathway you mentioned when you started at the beginning? They're interested in your career pathway.
Okay.
We have
So-
just a couple minutes left.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, and I do want to I have one kind of hands-on things for you guys. So KU Med has, and this is KU Med, right? Every institution has their own structure and organization to this, but KU Med has 3 academic tracks. It's research, clinical, and education. Okay. So I have my PhD. I don't see patients. I don't even, collaborate with a physician in a sense that I would even go into their space. Like, I get samples from them, but so the clinical path is not my track that I would be on. But depending on your degree and your responsibilities, it may. And if like, for instance, you're an MD, PhD, right? Then you might split the tracks And that's something that you actually kind of figure out as you get hired, how much teaching responsibility, how much research responsibility, and how much clinic responsibility you have. But there's different, it's a rubric that shows the different expectations for assistant professor and different expectations for associate, and how, what's going to be evaluated as you request a promotion and tenure. So hopefully that answers your question. I could, if you have more questions, you can always email me, and I can give you the link to where that is on the faculty development site, just so you can see the rubric. Okay, so if you're not sure like what your teaching philosophy is, in my research, I came across this teaching perspectives inventory. And this is a free self-report, self-scoring inventory. It's a website. I have it on, I think my next slide is all my, oh no, not yet. Okay. So anyway, it's a link on my references page, and it basically measures your profile on 5 types of ways to teach. So transmission, apprenticeship, developmental, nurturing, or social reform. And you end up with a kind of a bar chart like this. And I did mine because I was curious. And I'm very average and above average on nurturing, which doesn't surprise me. That's my personality. So this one is not mine though. This was one that I like screenshot off of a website that describes this page. So you can take this, but I think it's interesting. And I'm very much a like a self-help person. Like I pick up self-help books. And so this is enlightening for me, right? As in terms of what's my baseline approach to teaching in these particular views of teaching. So this is something that you could do that would maybe give it a little bit of self-awareness or insight as you go and start to craft your teaching philosophy statement. Okay, so as you move forward, I've already told you, ask for evaluations and file them away. But think about how you are actually putting into practice your teaching beliefs within your course. So this probably speaks to that question before. You know how to teach, you know what worked and what doesn't work, but how are you putting that into practice in your classroom? And how has your thinking about teaching practices evolved? So, and what have you done to change or enhance your teaching practices, maybe based off of feedback that you got, or any new innovations that you've incorporated in your teaching? These are things that you can kind of keep in mind and keep filed away as you either start to write your teaching philosophy statement, or each year as you evaluate your teaching philosophy statement, or maybe, you know, you're going through an annual evaluation or getting ready for a new job application. Think about some of these things as you move forward. Okay, finally, my resources. There's a ton, you guys. So any questions? I'm happy to entertain.
Awesome.